Welcome back to 46 and Widowed, Life, Love, and Family. I'm your host, Mr. Paul. It's been a while since we last talked, and again, things have changed within my grief journey. The last time we spoke, I had been dealing with some depression, which I will address that, but I feel as though I've come out of that stage with a different view of why I was feeling depressed. And if I'm not mistaken, I think when I spoke last time, of all these feelings of the loneliness, but I was also in the process of storing Debbie's clothes and belongings, and I think that's where the depression was coming from. But I also realized that I had been resisting, the final stage of grief, which is acceptance. And in general, the acceptance stage is coming to that understanding of the reality of the loss and starting to move forward and learning to live again. Living with knowing that this new life is different, knowing that my life has changed, but knowing that I have to continue on, not just for myself, but for my son as well, but getting back into those things that once brought me purpose, that brought me joy, that brought me happiness, and being okay with accepting that Debbie is not going to be part of that these new memories are going to be those of just me and my son, and of course the family and friends we have around us, but that she will be absent from those things that we do now, and being all right with that. And you would think that this final stage of grief, the accepting of all this, would be easy. And we hope that it would be easy, because it's like having to breathe again and being all right with the loss. But it takes a lot of work. I'm not saying that I think it's probably the hardest stage that I've gone through. And I had always imagined that entering the stage would be like waking up in the morning and things would be different. That I would wake up and all of it would be a dream. All of this would have just been one bad nightmare. But waking up now is being okay. I can say, well, before when people would ask me, they would say, "How are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Fine." Short, to the point, very blunt. And now when people ask how I'm doing, I can say I'm good. I am doing well. Where before I was always carrying this heavy burden of her loss and these emotions of just every memory moving forward of her not being in them. And now I can say I'm okay. I am good. I can have these new memories. I can have this new life and be all right with her not being part of it, but still knowing that, yeah, she's watching over us. She's seeing what we're doing. She's here. There's been signs. There's been things that I've noticed. I can still feel her around, but it's not as though I am hesitant to do things as where I was before. And as I said, this isn't an easy process to go through, especially this last stage. Because there are still a lot of random thoughts, raw emotions. Every emotion resurfaces, especially the anger at times. And I understand that this isn't a linear process, that this is going to be, I will cycle through all those things again. Except this time they won't be as heavy, they won't be as persistent, that I stop and freeze in my life, that I am able to see them, feel them, address them, And I said, okay, I can move forward. It's not hindering anything that I want to do now. And that was very hard at first to do that, because I would always talk about things I wanted to do, things I wanted to get back to. And I was always very hesitant because I knew that Debbie wouldn't be part of those memories. And part of the realization of getting to this point was that people had noticed, family had noticed, friends had noticed, my coworker had noticed that something was going on, that something was off, that I was not myself. And that's how I came to that realization that yes, I was feeling depressed because of Debbie's passing, but that I was also fighting myself internally of having to accept that I've come to that stage. And I try to manage all those emotions, cope with all those emotions on my own, and talking to myself, doing every counseling technique I could think of that would help. And what happened was it all turned into physical pain. I was complaining about my stomach always hurting. I had this knot in my chest. And I would sit there, through the day and just like, what is going on? I don't feel well. This isn't normal. And then I finally just had to open up and talk. I spoke with my coworker and I was telling her about it. I spoke to my brother and my sister-in-law. I was like, I don't know what this is. It's just like this coraje, this knot in my chest. My stomach is always upset. I just don't know what it is. And they all gave me the same answer. Their responses only validated all the stuff I was telling myself in my head. And I had to come to that understanding that, yeah, it had come to the point where the pain of losing Debbie had started occupying every thought, every feeling. It was getting me down. It made me stop doing things that I used to enjoy. And I wasn't living. I wasn't engaged in life. I had my things that I was obligated to do, like take care of my son, go to work, make sure the house was all right, grocery shopping. But it was all just motion. It wasn't being present. It wasn't life. And that realization hit hard because, again, I should know these things because I'm a counselor, but that's just an excuse. The reality of me going through this and actually feeling this process hit hard. And it was mostly due to my own misunderstanding of what that acceptance stage was. To me at the time was that once you got to that stage, it was over. Everything was done. Everything was going to disappear. All these feelings were going to disappear. And that's not the case. The truth is how I compartmentalized it, big word, is that love became grief when she died. And during the acceptance stage, that grief is transformed again, but this time into a different form of love. Love that comes with more peace, love that comes with more hope, love that comes with this understanding that I still have a life to live. That yes, Debbie was part of that life, but that I needed to now move forward with the life that I still have left. And that sense of peace did bring tears and it brought sadness because it was knowing that my life has now changed forever. I was having to learn to adjust and adapt, and I'm still trying to do it. I haven't completed it. I'm still in that process, but adjusting and adapting to this new life that has been hard to do because it means moving forward without her. Physically here. Spiritually, she's always here. Well, I know that's my belief, is that she's always watching over us. She makes herself known at times. But having to move forward without her physically here and making those new memories, making new plans. And I know that she would not want me to be lost in my grief. We talked about that. She gave me, her instructions. And I feel that she had helped me move into this stage. See, it still brings me to tears. But while I was slowly moving into this stage, I could hear her like, it's time, Paul. You need to, you'll be all right. Y'all will be all right. And during those days where I was coming to understand that, I don't know I lost count of how many red cardinals I was seeing outside my window at work, that just sitting there on the fence, and I knew she was around. There was one day that this one butterfly, I swear, was just following me around town. It followed me to work. I was following me here at the house. I went to the store, and I could still have this one butterfly just flying around me. And I swear, it's like this butterfly's, tracking me in town. And I just saw it as, okay, she is still here. She's trying to tell me, you'll be okay. This will be all right. You'll be all right. And then, of course, the way she would always reach out to me is through songs. Every song I heard those few days were songs about letting go. They were songs about being strong, moving forward, living life. And I was like, okay, I get your point. Okay, I will start working on this. And now that I do feel that sense of peace. I have that sense of hope again. So, where do I find myself now, and what I've come to understand from getting to this stage? I have found myself being able to communicate my feelings and thoughts about Debbie without crying and breaking down sometimes. I can have whole conversations, bring up old memories, and tears don't build up in my eye. My voice doesn't crack. I can hear other people tell me memories and stories, and the same thing is like I don't have that same pain and hurt that would usually come up when I was around people talking about her, or if I was talking about her. And what I've also found is that when I speak about her, they're now shared memories, they're happy memories, they're positive memories, and I can sit with those and be comfortable. The other day I had posted on my Facebook, not the 46 and Widowed. The other day I wrote, the other day I drove by a memory and I smiled. And it was true. I was driving around town. Okay, so every night, sometimes when we're out at my in-laws or my parents, to get my son to go to sleep, we drive around town for him to relax and calm down and get ready for bed. And we were driving around, and we passed the place that held a memory of me and Debbie. And usually when that would happen, I would break down and cry. Tears would build up, I'd get sad. But that day, I noticed I was smiling. I was happy. Happy that I had that memory. Happy to recall that. And then there's other times where I'll have a memory and I'll start laughing by myself, and my son looks at me like, okay, what's going on? You know, but that's when I've noticed, okay, I have come to that acceptance stage. I'm able to do these things, laugh again, smile again, joke around again, and be okay with that and not feel guilty that I've done those things. Because early on when I would go out and socialize and I would laugh at something or I would have a good time, I would feel that guilt afterwards. Like, oh no, I'm not supposed to be feeling this because I'm supposed to be mourning Debbie. I'm supposed to be in, mourning, and I shouldn't be feeling those things. And now I'm able to do that without feeling that guilt or those bad feelings that I should be doing things. I had found that the grief doesn't overtake the whole day either. There was days I would wake up and I'm like, here we go again. It's another day, or going to bed, and here I am alone again. I would just focus on those things, and now it doesn't take the whole day. I can feel it, I can tear up, and it doesn't ruin my day, and I'm able to move forward throughout the day and continue on. And it's like I've taken all the grief, the memory, the love, and the feelings that I have for Debbie and placed them in a box that I carry with me always. There's a part in my heart that will always have her, where I'll always carry her. And when I need to, I can go to that. I can go to those memories. I can go to those feelings and be okay with it. It's not locked away. It's not behind any walls for protection. It's there and it's open. And that's why I think I'm able to share that when I talk about her memories with others. When I talk about the feelings, that it now occupies that space where I would say my heart was broken when she died. It's now replaced with all those loving memories, the dreams we shared, the travels we had. But it's a place of peace, a place I know I can go to when I need to. I have also found myself not just talking about what I want to do, but now doing things. And that took a little push, again, from those that I spoke to, my coworkers and my brother and sister-in-law. And for months, I had been talking about, I want to take my son here, I want to go there. We just need to go a weekend and just get away, just the two of us, or just for the day. Something that just was time for me and him to connect, to have fun. And that's all I was doing, was just talking about it, never acting on it. And I remember one morning I woke up and I was like, okay, this is the day we're going to go. We're going to get up. We're going to go to the zoo. I'll let everybody know as we're leaving so that it's just me and him, so nobody's going along with us. It's going to be a son and daughter day, And it was a good day. Sorry. It was a good day. He enjoyed himself. I enjoyed myself. It was just me and him. He was laughing the whole time. The thought of Debbie would come and go, and it would just flashes. But I was focused on us just having a good day at the zoo. Whatever he wanted, he got. I wasn't going to say no. This was going to be a good memory for him and me. And we enjoyed ourselves. We spent the majority of the day at the zoo. And then by mid-noon or so, we were like, okay, we're getting hungry. Let's go eat. He was getting tired. And I said, let's go eat. So we went to Chuck E. Cheese and had spent some time there before we headed home. And of course, he had a good time. He got to play games. He got to do stuff. And just seeing him happy and smiling and laughing felt good. And of course, in my head, I said, why haven't I done this before? I've been talking about it, but that's here and there, or there. We had finally started doing it. And now he's like, where are we going next? What's the next trip? And that feels good because now I have a new travel partner. Me and Debbie would go all over the place. We just get up in one morning and take off somewhere and plan to go somewhere. And now I have him to do that with. And he's old enough now, to do more things than we used to. And so that's our plans now, is to start doing more and getting out more. One thing I have to say that I am still working on, and I know that it will take some time because it's very hard for people to do for themselves, and even harder for counselors to do it for themselves. And then that's to do more self-care and more self-compassion. Give more self-compassion. And I was asked the other day, is like, what do you do after your son falls asleep? And when he falls, he goes to sleep early, and I've been trying to keep him on a routine. So I have 2 or 3 hours after he falls asleep before I get ready for bed or whatever. And my answer to them was nothing. I sit and I would think about Debbie. I would break down and cry. Nothing would hold my interest. In the past, I was a big reader. I would watch TV, find all these new series and documentaries and things to watch, play video games. And what I had found when I would try to do those things was I just couldn't concentrate. I couldn't focus on what was going on because I was either looking at pictures or looking up sad songs to listen to or, thinking of Debbie, crying about Debbie, or I just simply shut mentally down and got distracted with TikTok. And that took up a lot of time. And you don't realize, I mean, you might realize how much time TikTok takes when you start scrolling because an hour can pass very quickly. And it was just random stuff. It wasn't even anything that was of interest. It was just junk videos, so to say, just to occupy a time so that I would either distract myself from thinking of my grief or feeling the grief or feeling anything and just pass the couple of hours before I had to go to bed. And I miss that old part of me, of the being able to read and focus and talk about things and read new interesting things. I have a whole bookshelf, two bookshelves of just books that I've yet to read. And I know I need to get back to that and really focus on that. And yeah, so when my son goes to sleep, I need to either get the book and sit in the living room and read so I don't disturb him, or do something that to get back to those old things, that old hobbies that I used to have. And not be bored and overthinking everything. So that's one thing I know I have to still work on. So that will still be a process to get back to doing my old things. Another thing that I was also told that I need to do is to get out more. My friends do not live in town, so it's not as though I can call them up and say, hey, let's go out here, let's go out there. But to socialize more, to go to parties that I'm invited to, be more active, get out of the house instead of just going for a little bit and coming home. I was always making excuses as to why I had to return home. It's like, and I would always use my son, sadly, as one of those excuses. Oh, well, he's tired. He needs to go to bed. But there's times where my in-laws or my parents will take care of my son overnight, and I would just come home and do nothing again. Find myself on TikTok, and I shouldn't do that. I need to do more, especially when I have free time on my own, is to get out, go do something. I'm not sure how to socialize much here in town because there's not much here in town, but maybe get involved in groups or try to do something to just be around other people besides my son. Have adult conversations, And so that's one thing I know I have to work on, and taking those first steps to get to that. What I've come to understand about grief and acceptance is that knowing that this journey isn't over. Just because I feel I've come into the acceptance stage, I know that's not the end. Because, like I said, grief is not linear; it's a cycle. So I know that I will be good right now, and it may last for a good while, but I may become angry again. I may get depressed again because of things. The holidays are coming, and I'm excited for my son. I'm excited to start decorating. He's like, when are we putting up the Christmas tree? Christmas is already here. Let's get going. And I'm like, hold on. We got Thanksgiving still to get through, and then we'll start decorating. And of course, the city is starting to put up the lights. The college had the lights, starting to put them up, and he's like all gun ho for Christmas, which was another of Debbie's big holidays. So I'm excited for that, and I'm excited more this year than I was last year. So I see that as a good thing. But I know that this grief, will come back around. But like I said, it's not going to be as heavy. It won't be as, trapping me into this way that I was this past year and the year before that. And, I have to prepare myself now as I come up to the 2-year mark. which will be in January. And being okay emotionally, being okay physically and spiritually, that I can get to the end of that year so that I can start year 3 with confidence, with more understanding, with more peace and hope, and know that yes, we will be okay. We will be all right. And we can still miss Debbie. We can still grieve her. We can still talk about her. But we'll be all right. And I think that's where a lot of times we misunderstand the acceptance stage, is because we have to understand that life continued on. The day Debbie died, life did not stop. The world did not stop. Everybody and everything around us continued on. As much as we would have loved for everything to stop, to honor her, to respect her, that didn't happen. And I know that Debbie wouldn't want me to be stuck the way I have been. And that I know I have to get back to finding my place in this new life I have. And to be open to whatever comes. Now, do I know what is coming? No. Do I need to be open to it? Yes. And am I ready for what is to come now? I'm hopeful. I may still be a little hesitant. But I am hopeful. I know that she's watching over us. I know that life has always been good to us. We've always put God in our life, and Diosito, lead us where you need to lead us, give us what we need, to get by, and we have always been blessed that way. And I think now that I've come to this part of my grief, I can go back to saying that, Diosito, I know we will be all right. Bless us with what we need to be blessed with. Lead us where you need to lead us. So, if I could wrap the whole acceptance stage up in just a few words, I would say that acceptance is not goodbye. Acceptance is not that this is over, that I will never think about Debbie again, or, this whole thing is done with and I will not look back. That's not true. Acceptance is learning to cope with the loss and being at peace that for a time I was loved and I loved, and it may not have been perfect and time may not have been on our side, but I loved and I was loved and we lived a good life. And I am grateful for the family we built. I'm not sure how I could have done this without Jojo. I think he's been a very big blessing. Not only to me, but to all of us that are grieving Debbie. And I am forever grateful that, she said yes when I brought up the adoption again. And again, I think Diosito knew what he was doing. We had put it in his hands. And of course, he blessed us with Jojo. And I'm forever grateful for that. So I know this is probably the shortest episode. I am actually recording this at a conference out in Houston that I'm at, so I don't have all my equipment with me, so bear with the sound and I'll try to fix it in editing. So that is all I have to say at the moment. So thank you for listening to 46 and Widow, Life, Love, and Family. I'm your host, Mr. Paul. Remember to check my socials on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter. Also, you can catch my past episodes on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and YouTube. So, if you're listening to this before Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. And God bless.